Snow fell hard that night, painting the whole street in white silence except for the chaos erupting right in front of my grandfather's house. Police lights washed the old siding in red and blue, strobing like some cheap carnival. The HOA president, Evelyn Hartman, stood in the middle of it all, screaming her verdict into the cold air, her voice slicing through the hush. She jabbed her fingers straight at my grandfather as the tow truck chains bit down and yanked his prized car out of the darkness. The sound of metal on metal echoed, clanking angry, while snow piled onto the hood of what used to be a beautiful machine, now nothing but a shattered shell. Decades he'd spent on that car. When his hands were stronger, steadier, he rebuilt it piece by piece, summers in the garage, every bolt, another memory, every polish, another day's peace. Now he just stood there, coat zipped up, not arguing, not defending, breath fogging out in the cold. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of all those accusations had pressed him down more than the snow ever could. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She kept at it, telling the cops he was negligent, dangerous, irresponsible, louder with every word feeding off the silence. She said his car caused the crash, that he owed her family everything, medical bills, damages, compensation. The officers looked at the wreck, then at my grandfather. No one spoke up for him. Evelyn's smile grew as if she could already taste victory. She never noticed me standing there, too busy grabbing control, barking orders. She even told the tow truck driver to block the road, called it a community safety measure. She acted like the whole street belonged to her, and all permission came from her lips alone. Every word she spoke about safety was really just another brick in her wall of authority. No questions, no discussion, just her commanding. She pointed at my grandfather's house and declared the driveway restricted. She told the police his car had been improperly maintained, that the accident proved it, that the HOA would be pursuing damages immediately. And then, a slip of honesty, sharp, cold. We can't let people like him disrupt order. There it was, her truth, naked for anyone who cared to hear it. Behind her, her son stood half in shadow, snowflakes sticking to his hair, his arm in a sling. He didn't speak, didn't protest, just stared at his own boots like the ground might swallow him up if he wished hard enough. My grandfather said nothing. He never does when someone in power decides to raise their voice. He'd lived in that house longer than most people had been alive in this neighborhood. Paid every fee, fixed his own fence, never caused a ripple. She knew that. She chose him anyway. The notice arrived the next morning before the snowplow did, wedged into the mailbox, the HOA logo stamped on top like a warning. Inside, demands for compensation. Medical bills, property damage, community disruption. Enough zeros to make his hands shake just reading them. They called his car a hazard, claimed negligence, claimed he was the threat. Never mind, the real driver was still in the hospital. He folded the letter as if it might cut him. He asked me quietly if maybe he'd done something wrong. If he should have just let the car go years ago. Maybe sign whatever they wanted just to end it. That's how they do it, turn up the pressure, not with shouting anymore, but with paper, with big numbers, with a cold, bureaucratic kind of fear. Outside, wind screamed across the driveway, snow erasing every trace that car ever existed. That afternoon, an HOA rep showed up. Clipboard in hand, boots thudding on the porch, voice flat, sign here, or penalties escalate. I watched as my grandfather apologized for things he hadn't done, nodded along the fight, draining out of him. But the letter's language bothered me, the way responsibility had been so neatly spun, the way facts bent to fit a story that wasn't true. The next blow came in the form of an email, emergency HOA meeting, mandatory attendance. The letter accused my grandfather of endangering the neighborhood, cited updated safety standards, threatened fines big enough to put a lien on his house. At the bottom, Evelyn Hartman, President, Northridge HOA. At that meeting, with snow hammering the windows, Evelyn stood up front and talked about liability insurance risk. Never once did she say theft. When a neighbor asked who'd been driving, she cut him off, police report. Inconclusive, no speculation allowed. The board had to act fast. Then she unveiled their next move, an inspection order. They wanted access to his garage, his tools, his storage, anything they could twist into evidence. Refusal, she warned, would be documented as non-compliance. I watched her shut down every question, steer every doubt back to her script. This wasn't confusion, it was choreography. As the meeting broke up, Evelyn met my grandfather's gaze with a smile, small, tight, and utterly satisfied. He whispered to me maybe it was time to sell the house before things got worse. And that's when it all clicked. She wasn't managing a mess, she was orchestrating one. That night I started digging, pulled every bit of traffic footage. Snowcam anything I could get. The car, it left the neighborhood hours before the supposed accident. I watched the video again and again, Evelyn's son behind the wheel driving way too fast for icy roads, losing control, disappearing from frame. The theft wasn't a rumor. It was right there, caught in the pixels. I pulled the police report again, too vague, too careful. Looked like someone had sanded off the rough edges to fit a narrative. That cold, sharp anger took root. My grandfather hadn't just been blamed, he'd been targeted. Chosen because he was quiet, old, alone. Someone they figured would fold under enough paper and shame. They didn't expect anyone to actually pay attention. I pushed on, pulled the full accident report line by line, finding every vague timeline, every cautious phrase. The car left hours before they claimed. They hadn't followed the facts, they'd written the ending and worked backward. Quietly, I ran the details by a friend in accident review. He took a long pause. "This doesn't sound right," he finally said. "Looks adjusted." Adjusted, polite word for tampered. Light. I documented everything, timelines, emails, discrepancies, and filed for formal reassignment. No accusations, just facts. And then all at once, the HOA went silent. Calls stopped, emails dried up, Evelyn's name vanished from correspondence. Only silence that thick means someone higher up is watching. A patrol supervisor came by for a welfare check. Neutral questions, notepad out, eyes on the garage. Before leaving, he shook my hand and said quietly, "This file's been flagged." That night, the snow fell harder, muffling the whole neighborhood. My grandfather sat at the kitchen table, fingers tracing the same stack of papers. "Is it going to get worse?" he asked. I told him the truth, it might. People like Evelyn rarely let go easy. The next attempt came disguised as kindness. Evelyn's attorney emailed offering a reduced settlement if my grandfather admitted to partial blame and promised not to sue. No talk of theft, just a clean signature line. I forwarded it to the new investigators, no comment needed. By noon, the HOA board was crumbling. Members who'd never said a word to my grandfather before now called him by his first name, offered apologies, suggested dropping the whole thing for peace. Then Evelyn herself came, snow still clinging to her coat. She tried to play mediator, soft voice, saying accidents happen, misunderstandings are normal, cooperation would make it all disappear. When my grandfather didn't respond, she dropped the mask, threatened with liens, asset reviews, HOA, bylaw enforcement. I stepped in between them. She looked me up and down, voice barely above a whisper. "You should tell him to be reasonable. Things don't end well for people who push back against the HOA." That was her real face finally shown. I watched her walk down the drive, dialing her phone, probably calling in backup. An hour later, I sent out the full evidence package, video, timestamps, the altered report, the settlement offer, to every board member, HOA, legal, the new investigators. That evening, the HOA called an emergency public meeting, mandatory attendance, no agenda. Just one promise: whatever decisions happened in that room would be binding. The clubhouse was packed, neighbors still brushing snow from their coats, boots stacked along the wall, tension heavy in the air. Evelyn tried to keep control, talking about order, responsibility, community safety, never saying my grandfather's name, but everyone knew who she meant. Then the doors opened. A uniformed officer stepped in, trailed by a county official. The room fell silent. Evelyn pressed on, but the officer interrupted, looking right at me. "We're ready when you are." Heads turned. The power shifted in a heartbeat. I stood finally and said, "This meeting is being recorded, and it's about to change direction." The lights dimmed. Footage played snowy streets, my grandfather's car leaving hours before the crash. Evelyn's son behind the wheel. Then traffic cams speeding, sliding the impact. Side by side, the original accident report and the adjusted version language, softened, blame redirected. Finally, the attorney's email offering hush money. The county official stepped forward. "This is evidence of report manipulation and attempted coercion. The HOA has exceeded its legal authority." Evelyn tried to protest, but nobody listened. Not the board, not her neighbors. The officer said, "Ma'am, you're removed from your position immediately." The county official listed the rest: obstruction, civil liability, independent administrator, frozen assets. Evelyn's son would be charged separately: vehicle theft, reckless endangerment. The room stayed silent. No applause. just the sound of power breaking. My grandfather sat there, hands folded, watching it all. For the first time since that night in the snow, his shoulders relaxed. When the officers led Evelyn out, she didn't look back. When the doors shut, the whole room seemed to breathe again. No one spoke for a long minute. Then a neighbor voice, trembling, apologized for not speaking up sooner. Others followed short, honest admissions, a sense that something tight had finally loosened. People who'd avoided my grandfather now looked him in the eye, embarrassed at how easy it was to let him stand alone. He nodded, saying nothing more. Sometimes dignity is louder than any speech. A board member asked if he was all right. He just smiled, gentle and tired. "I am now." The county official read the outcomes: formal charges for Evelyn, restitution for my grandfather, all HOA actions against him voided. New rules: no more surprise enforcement, no more threats without a community vote. The law would stand between the bullies and the quiet ones. We stepped outside. The street cleared, the world new again. My grandfather paused by the window, gazing at the empty spot where his car had always sat. "I love that thing," he said. "I know." He smiled for real this time. It did its job, told the truth when I couldn't. The meeting room faded into darkness, its power gone. We walked into the falling snow unafraid. For the first time in weeks, he didn't brace himself against the wind. He just walked. Justice, I learned, doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs someone willing to stand steady when the world is at its worst. And looking back, the real victory wasn't erasing a debt or clearing a name. It was seeing how close everything came to going the wrong way. If I'd answered fire with fire, if I'd shouted or threatened, none of this would have stuck. The truth came out not because we yelled louder, but because we trusted the process even when it was slow, even when it hurt. Patience beats pressure. Evidence beats outrage. Staying calm lets the ground stay steady beneath your feet. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone who finds themselves in a fight like this, keep your records read, every line. Don't be afraid to ask for help from the people who know how the system works. It's not about escalating, it's about stabilizing. Communities don't fall apart because of one loud bully. They crumble when nobody stands up and keeps power honest. That old garage is empty now, but it still stands. Solid, unchanged, honest. That's what the law is supposed to be, steady enough to protect folks who don't know how to fight back. So, where's the line for you? When does standing up for yourself turn into something darker? Have you seen power used to protect or to silence? I want to hear your story, your wins, your lessons, your moments, when justice meant holding your ground. Drop a comment below. Let's talk about what justice really looks like in our lives, in our communities, right here.